back 2/3.
Arms back 2/3 aye, sir.
China reacts angrily to a U.S. show of force in the South China Sea.
Amid rising tensions with China on trade and North Korea, the U.S. Navy's Ronald Reagan Strike Group conducted drills in the South China Sea with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Forces Escort Flotilla 4 Battle Group, which is led by the helicopter destroyer Kaga. A move that could anger China. The Maritime Self-Defense Force's largest vessel, the helicopter carrier Kaga, linked up Friday for bilateral exercises with the U.S. Navy's Ronald Reagan Aircraft Carrier Strike Group. The bilateral training is part of a rare, month-long tour by the Kaga and 2 guided missile destroyers that will see them make port calls in India, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Indonesia and the Philippines. As a part of the dispatch, which began August 26 and will run through October, the vessels will also conduct joint exercises aimed at bolstering combat skills and improving cooperation with each country's navy, according to the Defense Ministry's Maritime Staff Office. During Friday's training session, which involved U.S. ships based in Yokosuka, Kanagawa Prefecture, the 2 navies practiced sailing in formation, maneuvering procedures, as well as replenishment at sea training. They also exchanged naval liaison officers.
And nav 8 is Charlie 2. Come right, sir, course 084.
Come right, sir, course 084 aye, sir.
USS Ronald Reagan departed Commander Fleet Activities Yokosuka to begin a summer patrol.
USS Ronald Reagan and our embarked Carrier Air Wing 5, are looking forward to integrated operations, not just together, but with our other ships operating here from Yokosuka as a carrier strike group and operating with our friends and allies in the region in planned exercises over the upcoming months.
The departure from Yokosuka marks the end of Reagan's scheduled maintenance period.
Arms back 2/3.
Arms back 2/3 aye, sir.
The crew will start at-sea operations defending the collective maritime interests of the U.S. and its allies in the Indo-Asia Pacific region. For USS Ronald Reagan, I'm Seaman Apprentice Randy Adams.
On Monday and Thursday, 2 U.S. Air Force B-52 bombers from Andersen Air Force Base on Guam conducted training in the vicinity of the South China Sea before returning to the island territory, the U.S. Pacific Air Forces said in a statement released Friday. In addition to Thursday's routine training, the B-52s also integrated with the Reagan Strike Group. China has bolstered its military presence in the region through the deployment of advanced war-fighting systems, including jamming technology, anti-ship cruise missiles, and surface-to-air missiles. With a renewed focus on great power competition, the U.S. military has been showcasing its power in the South China Sea through carrier exercises and bomber overflights.
China has blasted the United States for flying a pair of B-52 bombers near disputed islands in the South China Sea, further fueling tensions between the 2 countries. The Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying accusing the U.S. of stirring up trouble and warning China will not be threatened by any military warships. Hua said that China would do whatever is necessary to protect its sovereignty. Bonnie, thanks for being with us. We know that China is claiming the entire South China Sea, plus more than that. What does the U.S. want them to do? Has the United States expressed anything definitive?
Well, over the years, not only in the Trump administration, but also in the Obama administration, the United States has called for China to not increase tensions, to exercise self-restraint, to negotiate a code of conduct with the other claimants and frankly all of Southeast Asia that are these 10 countries that are members of ASEAN so that they can peacefully manage their disputes. And the United States has essentially asked China, as it has asked all countries, to abide by international law. And there was an arbitral tribunal finding in July of 2016 that the 9-dash line does not have any legal standing. and therefore claims that any country makes to any land features in the South China Sea and water has to be in accordance with the Convention on the Law of the Sea. So if you claim water, it has to extend from land. China continues to say that it has some ill-defined claim of historic rights and jurisdiction over a large swath of the waters in the South China Sea. And so I do think that the United States has been clear about what all countries should do, and it is not singling out China. There should be no militarization, no construction of fake islands, and everybody should abide by law and look for peaceful ways to manage disputes.
But China is paying no attention to those pleas.
Well, that's pretty much correct. China has, I think, a blueprint for what it wants to do in the South China Sea. It continues to militarize its islands. It continues to intimidate and bully its neighbors. It has recently threatened both the Philippines and Vietnam with military force if they go ahead and exploit energy reserves, energy deposits that are inside their legal maritime boundaries, what's known as the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. That's very much illegal. So when the U.S. says the rights of small countries and large countries alike should be respected, it has those kinds of actions in mind. So the Chinese indeed are really not exercising self-restraint at all. They are acting in accordance with their own interests, and they are damaging the interests of other countries.
How big of a flashpoint is this?
Well, I really don't think that the U.S. and China are going to have a military conflict in the South China Sea, even if there were an accident, say, between two ships or two aircraft. And some of your listeners may remember that in 2001, there actually was a collision between a U.S. surveillance aircraft and a Chinese jet. The Chinese pilot died. The Americans that were on board the surveillance aircraft did land in an emergency landing in Hainan Island, and they all survived. But that could happen again. So, yes, there's a risk of accident. There certainly is a high risk of growing tensions. But I don't think that there is a very great likelihood that we're going to see a war that is triggered in the South China Sea.
You see a way out of this?
I think that there will be competition that will go on for some time. I don't think that China is going to make concessions, and I think that the United States will continue to exercise freedom of navigation. But the United States can't roll back what China has achieved. It's turning of these islands into military outposts. So I think in peacetime, China will continue to use these outposts to coerce their neighbors. I think the U.S. doesn't have a good toolbox to prevent that. And as long as we don't go to war, then there will never be any real use of the military capabilities to fight each other. I don't see any near-term solution unless China decides that its relations with the rest of the region are more important than what it's trying to do in the South China Sea. Right now, China thinks it can have its cake and eat it too. It can have both the good relations with the region, and it can build up these military outposts. And as long as it sees it can do both, it will do both. So the real question is how to shape a strategy that forces China to choose, and that can only be done if the claimants and the other members in ASEAN will stand up against China, push back and say, our interests matter too. But for obvious reasons, they're all afraid to do so. And they don't think that the United States has their back, and they're probably right.
How you guys been today?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad. We got one more package that just needs to be dropped in North Slick.